Hi, welcome to Kick-Ass Switch, putting the K in magic. I'm Joanna DeVoe, and you are watching another episode of Every Which Way. This time featuring a man! We got ourselves a man! Chris Orapello of Down at the Crossroads, my all-time favorite Pagan podcast. If you are not listening to Down at the Crossroads, I hope as soon as this interview is over, you will go over to iTunes and subscribe. Chris, to me, he just represents authenticity and coming from a place of heart center. And he's too humble to say that about himself, but I will happily say it. He is a sculptor and an artist, and he's got a kick-ass radio voice, as you will see here in a minute. And what I really enjoy about him, too, is that he's a little bit of a rebel. He likes to challenge the status quo and question things, and he's explored all different paths in witchcraft and the occult and paganism, and really come to a place where he's crafting his own tradition. So we talk a lot about that in this interview. It's super fascinating. Grab yourself a cup of tea, sit down, and have a listen with Chris Orapello. Hi, Chris. Welcome to Every Which Way.
Hi, Joanna. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's fun to talk to you face to face because I'm a fan of your podcast. I love listening to you.
Well, thank you. That's always nice to hear. I don't do this show for any kind of credibility or anything like that. Some people, I think, do stuff like this, like podcasting, for example, to make themselves seem more important. I just do it because I enjoy it, and I like to talk to people and share information. So,
yeah.
But thank you very much.
I feel that. It has a really personal feel to it. I'm not a fan of pagan intros often. I don't know why. They just don't resonate with me. It's just a different vibe. But I usually just kind of fast forward. But I love yours. I love it. Every time it just sounds like the opening of Sacred Space to me. And that is your voice, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Do you mind sharing that with us?
What me doing the intro?
Yeah, do you know it off the top of your head, like when you're calling
from the east?
Yes.
From the east. Yeah.
How does it go?
Let's see. From the east, I go to west, about to north, and then to south, crossing roads as I go about, laying the ground for a witch's work. Down at the crossroads is where we vow to meet with she and he and they and thou. Upon this night and in this hour, I call upon thee to beseech thy power.
I love that so much. I'm smiling so hard my face is going to fall off.
I'm just glad I did that without messing up.
It was perfect. You might have a second career in voiceover. Audible needs you, that's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, if there's money in it, I'm there, right?
Right, yeah. Another thing that's really special about your podcast is the music. Like, I can tell it's a personal thing and you love these artists. You've introduced me, Omnia, I love. One song in particular, I was just like, you'll say the name of it and then I have to go rewinding back to figure out where can I find this. But then S.J. Tucker you really turned me on to as well.
Cool. SJ is awesome. She's great.
Yeah. Are you meeting these people at festivals? Or are you just a fan trolling the internet?
It's a little bit of both, I mean, some of it, learning about SJ Tucker came from listening to other podcasts for years. And, excuse me. And I don't get out to a lot of festivals and events, but I try to when I can. I've met some of the people that actually I play music for. I mean, I met S.J. Tucker. We text once in a while on phones, but I don't want to sound like I'm pimping anything out. But it's nice to be able to meet people, and her and I just got along really well on the show. So I've met her a couple of times. Met Sharon Knight and her husband Winter. They were great. I could have met Fawn, but I try to not be such a fan person. Whenever I'm around the people that I've interviewed, or even when I interview them, I try to just hey, I know who you are. It's cool. Thank you for coming on the show. I don't like try to splurge all over them as like a fan person. But at FairyCon, which is a convention now, FairyCon, I think it used to be called FairyCon East. Now it's, I think, officially just called FairyCon. But it happens in Maryland every year in November. And Fawn's walking around. The band is always around, but I've never actually bothered them to say hi, but I have met Wendy Rule. She's sweet. And a great performer. I mean, they're all great performers, but to see Wendy live is very powerful. If you have you ever seen her live? Or,
no. I know people are crazy about her, though. I know, like I've seen people get really excited, like we're going to see Wendy Rule.
Yeah, she's a very powerful performer. Like you feel her presence when she's in the room performing.
You've busted a lot of cliches that I had in my head of the pagan.
How so?
The pagan community, I think of it as very crushed velvet, Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing, or that's the idea I had in my head. Even though
it's there.
It is. I'm a witch, so I understand that, but that's just not my vibe. It just doesn't resonate with me.
Me neither.
But I would say your statues that you create, the sculptures, I guess they are, and the music that you share, it's a taste level that, I don't know, it's just elevated my perception of the entire community, really.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's really neat to hear. What's that?
Are those sculptures?
Yes. The Witch Lord and the Witch Queen, I think you're referring to specifically, probably. They're both done. They were both done in clay, but they're available in bronze. And the Witch Lord, which I'll pull them off to the side here.
Yeah, let us see.
This is actually he's available from Sacred Source, beloved statue company. You'll see a lot of their things on sale in a lot of stores, online and in person at brick and mortar stores. But the Witch Lord this version is available from Sacred Source in resin, but I also make him available in bronze at a much more expensive price because it's all hand done, and it's just the material is expensive and the time that gets put into it is very, very costly. So, but thankfully, Sacred Source was really awesome about taking on the Witch Lord and me as a featured artist to carry my work. So he's available. Right now he's out of stock because he's that popular, which is really awesome. But he will be in stock this month, I believe. Should be. Their spring shipment is coming somewhere within, the month of May.
Nice.
So, and they're expecting a bunch of him. So he will be in stock again. So, if anyone watching, if you've purchased him and you're waiting, because he's on back order, you're going to be getting yours very soon. So,
oh, cool. But, can you cover up your face for just a minute so we can see him better? Yes. Okay, perfect. And he is anatomically correct, that man there, that Witch Lord.
Yes, he is.
I tried to buy a crystal penis yesterday, actually, and it was sold out. But there's so many depictions of the goddess and female representations that I really gravitate toward kind of the more masculine things sometimes, just to get that balance going. The one statue that I have is, I call it my Pagan Sex Statue, but it's actually a depiction of the Great Rite, and it's from Sacred Source. I love it.
Okay. I think I know the piece you're talking about. So two people intertwined, seated on their laps, embracing.
Yeah. So what got you into that?
Into sculpting?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my background is an artist. I have my master's in fine art, and I've worked at an art foundry, a bronze foundry specifically, since 2001. I'm around artists all the time. I'm always working on art, not always my own art, unfortunately, but it's always nice to be a part of the creation of other things. I've had the opportunity to be one of many, but one of the people who had a hand in the assembly and production of the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Oh, neat.
So, anyone who's gone to that is familiar with the Atlantic and the Pacific pavilions. Well, the foundry that I work for did the four columns with the wreath and the four eagles holding the wreath above in those pavilions, as well as the 24 relief plaques that line the entranceway into the memorial. We, as a company, well, the company that I work for, we work for artists. So, the artist in question, who was Ray Caskey, he's based in D.C., I believe, or just outside of D.C., in Maryland. He brought the originals to us to produce in bronze. So they're not our artwork, but we helped produce them. So I had a hand in assembling all those columns that those eagles are on, me and one other gentleman. So, it's really neat to have been a part of that. And
yeah.
So
you really fit in with this idea I have of people that gravitate toward witchcraft and magic as being artists, very creative people, because it's a creative spirituality. To me, it's the art of spirituality, because I really came at it through a very new agey law of attraction kind of road, where it was very stripped down, but I was definitely performing magic. I was definitely creating things that felt very magical, and that's really what got me into witchcraft, actually. And then I started seeing, like, well, this is the art of magic. This is, it's the creative aspect of it. Do you feel that way? Like, perhaps that resonates, or not at all?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the creation of art, the creation of anything is definitely an act of magic. The formation of an idea, the act of bringing something into being, into formation, and into solidification. Being the four processes associated with the elements: air, fire, water, earth. So yeah, definitely, it's an act of magic. Bringing something into physical formation, from nothing, is definitely an act of magic. And I do believe that, like kind of what you were alluding to, that obviously witchcraft is a craft, but it has aspects to it that help. That formulate into spirituality, into religion, but also utilize and apply magic in various ways. So
yeah. Do you consider yourself a witch? I don't know if I've ever heard you say that.
I do, only because I don't really have another term that I actually like. Like some people use sorcerer, some people use wizard, few people use warlock. Or magician, or I use witch, but I use it begrudgingly, only because it doesn't feel entirely comfortable to me, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's if I associate the phrase witch with women or not. I don't know. I haven't been able to figure it out.
Yeah.
But right now, the closest thing that I identify with is witch. It's always been the practice that I go back to. I started with working spells. I got heavily into Wicca for a while, moved around between different interests in occultism. Excuse me, there's something in my eye. The tragedy of having contacts. So I kind of skated around a lot of different schools of thought, like Thelema, left-hand path for a period of time, chaos magic. But I always went back to Wicca. And right now I don't consider myself a Wiccan by any means, but I still am very much interested in witchcraft and where that path will take me. So
that's what I think click with when I'm listening to you is you're very discerning. You question everything. I'm very much like that myself. Why are we doing this? Why are we using this label? Why this ritual? Why this rite? Where did this come from? And I know you've had a lot of those moments yourself, and I really enjoy that when you've talked about that on your podcast. And it seems like you're really just leaning toward creating, a lot of us craft our own practice, but it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're creating maybe your own tradition now. Is that kind of what you're thinking, as you're trying to form a new coven, or you have formed a new coven?
Well, yeah, yes to all of that. calling it a tradition is the only way to really call it. It sounds really presumptuous when it's just two people practicing it. Calling it a coven is also presumptuous, but we call it because it's only two people. So it's like it sounds kind of weird to call it a coven when there's only two people involved in it. But the idea about the coven, which we call the Black Tree, is that we're open to other people. So we call it a coven to give it that idea that it's a group, that it's a thing that is open to other people. So, but yeah, we're trying to create our own thing, and like the podcast and I guess even my YouTube channel, which I've neglected for the last couple of weeks. I don't do anything to make myself appear special. I do it because they're out of a complete inherent necessity. Mm-hmm. So, like my artwork, I didn't sculpt the things to be edgy or to create attention. I understand that the creation of artwork, for example, and please don't let me lose the answer to the question that you asked, but it's inherently a selfish endeavor, and that's not set to be arrogant or anything or mean, but it has to fulfill something personal in me before I feel that it's suitable for anybody else. Mm-hmm. So the creation of the tradition grew out of a lot of my experience and different avenues that I wandered down. And I started to think more along the lines of being more animistic and locally based, with my practice. And that forced me to drop a lot of the ideas of deities and cultural things from past cultures and civilizations and what have you, because none of it was relevant to me. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it doesn't matter what my bloodline is. That's good and all. I'm part Italian, but I am in South Jersey. I'm not in Italy. I'm not in, the UK. So deities like Hearn, for example, which was an interesting revelation on my part, where I was doing a paper on Hearn for a coven that I was a part of. And it dawned on me when I learned about Hearn, I learned that he's basically a spirit that haunts a forest in Windsor over in the UK. And I'm like, that's very strange that this spirit that haunts a forest becomes this deity. And I'm like, that's very odd. But it instantly made me think of the Jersey Devil, which is a spirit that haunts the forest in South Jersey. So I'm just like, well, if Hearn can become a deity or some kind of an elevated being of some kind, why can't the Jersey Devil? Yeah. And that started to make me think about the Jersey Devil in a different light. Now, I don't practice a religion in the sense that I don't like to think of witchcraft as a religion, but I think through the practice of it, you eventually start to develop a religion because you develop beliefs and your own understandings and the things that you hold special and sacred, and by default, that starts to become a religion.
That's an interesting point, because I'm very allergic to that word. I think of magic as a craft. I think of it as a practice. For me, it's spiritual because that feels like where it's coming from. But the way you just described that it does make me think again about the word religion and just the different rituals you put in place, the different structures you put in place to contain whatever your practice ends up being. Yeah. Like, is that a religion?
I mean, by default, it's going to reflect your worldview, your understandings, the things that you hold sacred and special. So I always try to keep a distinction there between witchcraft and religion. And being in Black Tree or running Black Tree right now, when it's just my girlfriend and I, it's weird, or rather, it's extremely difficult to maintain that distinction because there's no not Black Tree. Mm-hmm. We're never like minus other people from the group because it's only just her and I, so it's always just us. So it's tough to create a distinction between what is and isn't coven practice, and what's personal practice as opposed to coven practice. I mean, my personal practice would just have to turn into me ditching her in the living room while I go into another room and do something, which that's no fun.
Yeah, it seems like who you are and what you do is so authentic, and everything is just this organic evolution. I think traditions, they have to start somewhere. Every tradition, and so many witchcraft traditions, they're not that old, let's face it.
No.
So who knows what it will grow into?
Yeah.
I have an interesting question, because
Sure.
it's probably only interesting to me. I don't know, but you mentioned Robert Cochrane. Is it Robert?
Yes.
You mention him all the time. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I did go on Amazon to like see, like, okay, he's an author. Why do you love this guy? Like, what is that about?
Oh, well, he is like he's probably the person associated with what is called traditional witchcraft. And I have to do this because just saying traditional witchcraft has a different implication than saying traditional witchcraft. And the distinction is that it's actually a thing. It's not just a tradition of witchcraft. It's actually as specific as saying Wicca. You know, there's an implication behind it. In traditional witchcraft, it's a thing, but it's weird because it's almost as elusive to define. I think it's more elusive to define than Wicca is. But Cochrane is probably the most associated person with traditional witchcraft. He was one of the people from back in the 60s who were creating a bit of a fuss about witchcraft and trying to be somewhat of a public figure. But Cochrane's thing, his real name is Roy Bowers, but in regards to witchcraft and his practice of witchcraft, he's known as Robert Cochrane. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where that name came from. There's got to be a story behind it, but I don't know what that story is. But he's most probably known for his hatred of Charles Gardner and Wicca and Gardnerian. He actually coined the phrase Gardnerian. So, and it was actually pejorative at first. Those Gardnerians practicing their Gardnerianism, But he had a coven called the Clan of Tubal-Cain, which is still active. And he only was like a public witch for 3 years, from 1963-ish to 1966. Unfortunately, he died of his own hand by taking too much belladonna on purpose. His coven went down a weird road where he cheated on his wife with one of the members, and she left him, and his life went downhill rather quickly, and he downed a bunch of belladonna on Midsummer's Night in 1966 and died 9 days later.
Wow, that's dark. Do you think that's a reflection of... I think about this a lot with Crowley, Aleister Crowley, but do you think that's a reflection of his path? Or do you think that's just him personally? And, like the work he created, do you think that means it was a miss? Or do you think that means, whatever, it was just his own personal demons that he had going on, and it's not a reflection of the work that he did?
Oh, no. He was kind of a messed up guy.
Yeah.
Knowing who Robert Cochrane was is really difficult because he always lied about who he was, or rather told stories about who he was to kind of confuse fiction with reality, so...
Another thing he has in common with Crowley.
Yeah. But I don't think his practices led him to suicide, or I just think he was just human.
Yeah.
He messed up. He felt the ramifications of his actions. He went down this hole of despair and depression and took his own life.
Do you, maybe I'm getting too deep with this and you can refuse to answer this, but do you feel like a responsibility with Black Tree and you and your girlfriend? Like, does that, I don't know, are there any like worries that creep in? Like, what if we invite other people, or what, like, do you feel married, and this is forever? How does being in a personal relationship with someone that you're starting this coven with, does it affect it in any way, or does it enhance it?
Well, I could see that it could affect it, but I mean, I've been with my girlfriend for way I was going to say way too long, but I didn't mean that to sound like how it was going to sound. Way too long in the sense that most people would think, why the hell aren't you married? We've been together for, God, almost 15 years now. So that's the only reason I say way too long, because we've been together for that long that most people would have been married by this point. It's never really been a topic of consideration for us. But we've been living together for, God, I don't even remember how long now, 6, 7 years. And so it doesn't feel like it would impact or, starting a coven doesn't feel like there might be any kind of a problem there. I mean, so I'm not sure if that's really what you were asking about, or
yeah, it's just being nosy. You don't have to get into that.
That's fine. Nosy's okay.
Yeah, and then speaking of nosy too, I'm wondering. I started on YouTube, and I started my podcast in 2013 after I had been doing YouTube videos for a while, and they're very different in my experience. It draws a different audience. I've noticed most people want to listen to you as opposed to watch you. There's a lot more people that listen to podcasts than watch the videos, and they're different. There's just a different tone to it. So you, as far as I know, started with the podcast, and then you recently just joined in the YouTube conversation. So have you noticed a different crowd, or are your people that are listening to your podcast following you over to YouTube and you recognize them?
Yeah, I think there's a give and take between both. People finding me on YouTube and then learning about the podcast, or people who are listening to the podcast and then went over to the YouTube channel as well, because I put in the feed an announcement about the YouTube channel. So, the people who listen to the podcast were made known that the YouTube channel happens. It's a nice medium. Obviously, it's a visual medium, so I can bring in other things that I couldn't do in purely audio. But at the same time, because it's a visual medium, I need to shave. I need to clean myself up before I can do anything, and that contributes to my ability to do videos as often as I'm not able to do videos.
Yeah.
So
I'm wondering if that's a little bit of a sexist thing now that I bring it up and I'm hearing you say, no, because I know, on a podcast, people are finding me that way and hearing me, and I feel like they're more engaged with the content, whereas on the YouTube videos, they're engaged as well, but I do get, every couple of weeks that "show us your boobs" message.
Really?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, people are less, I think, respectful, and I'm wondering, well, maybe that's just because I'm just like a goofy blonde on YouTube, and on a podcast, they're just hearing me. Goofy, but they can't see what I look like.
Well, I've heard YouTube, you're not anybody on YouTube until you've been rudely insulted by a 5-year-old,
Yeah.
You don't know who you're dealing with on the internet. That's the thing. That it could have been an 11-year-old, it could have been a 40-year-old, who said stuff like that to you.
That's true. That's true. I think there's a different intimacy, though, too, with the podcast. I get more people inquire about deeper things. They share their lives, like, I listened to this episode, and then they just launch into these personal stories. And I think maybe it's about, you're in my ears. I'm living my life. I'm washing the dishes. I'm driving my car while I'm listening to you. So I guess that's why I wanted to know what your experience, if there was a difference. It's okay if there's not.
I'm not sure. There has to be. Obviously, podcasting is much more portable. Now with smartphones, videos can be more portable as well, and tablets and things like that. You can watch them anywhere. But for a while, the only place you could do it was at home on your computer. But that's not necessarily the case now. Maybe with podcasting, it engages your brain a little differently because it's purely audio. Kind of like reading is a lot different than watching a movie.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that could be. So you're not in this to have a business. It's not a business for you, although the production values are perfect. Sounds beautiful.
Thank you.
That's largely, now I'm realizing, talking to you, the quality of your voice. You have a radio voice. That's definitely.
Oh, do I?
Yeah, you've got that voice. So where do you see yourself going somewhere with this, or just continuing on this path? Is there a goal in mind, or you're just kind of showing up as who you are and just being authentic to the moment.
I don't know. I do think about that. Like, where am I going with all this? Is it good enough to just be a podcaster or just a sculptor or what? Or what are the options? Like, where could I go with all this?
Yeah.
I toyed with the idea of starting a Patreon page, with the idea that I wouldn't have to work as much during my day job and I could devote more time to other things. That's kind of a lot of my problems now, is that my day job affects, which I love. I like my day job. I like who I work for, and the work that I do is always very interesting. But it does impact my ability to produce things like the prototype for the Witch Queen, which I need to do so that Sacred Source can carry a copy of the Witch Queen.
Yeah.
I haven't had the time, or I should be a little bit more fair and say that I haven't made the time to do it. But that would involve me using like my personal vacation time in order to make a new mold for her to cast the resin. So, but as far as, where I'm going with all this stuff, I definitely like engaging with the community and presenting to the community, destroying stereotypes, breaking down walls, and the subtle ways that I've done that. So I would like to write, maybe put out a book at some point in the future. That would be really cool. Become an author, be a known sculptor and artist for the community. With my background in doing bronze statues, I can easily do much larger pieces like memorials and monuments. I have that knowledge to do that, and at the moment, at least, the access to do that, because I know the people who can help me in those regards. So, the future is wide open.
I love it. Have you thought about teaching or doing retreats or anything like that? Because I don't know if you see yourself that way. I think you're so humble, and it's just sculpting or just the podcast, and I'm like, no, it's not just that. It's like, it's an education, and it's fascinating, and I've learned new. I'm a book nerd. I've been studying the occult for 24 years, something like that. And I had never heard of Robert Cochrane. Like, how have I never heard of this guy? How have I never heard of S.J. Tucker? I don't know. So people, it's not just that you're introducing us to new things. You say interesting things that make me think or shift my perspective a little bit. So why not teach? I'm curious about that too.
I'm not against teaching. It's weird. I don't, sometimes I'm just like, well, what would I say that would be new to anybody? But I guess that's just me getting lost in my own head. I'm as much a victim as anybody else. Yeah. I do workshops once in a while, Pagan Pride Days and things like that. I did actually present at FairyCon last year to a very small audience, but I talked about my artwork. And had a PowerPoint presentation that went along with it. I don't know. I would like to get into it, because I have been asked by multiple people about teaching and offering a course, and I'm just like, I could probably design one. I have no doubt about that, but I wouldn't know. I have to learn how to incorporate that into an internet experience. Like, is it purely a Skype thing, or are there things online that I'm just not aware of that would help me actually do a course? I'm not sure. It's something I would need to definitely look into.
I'll tell you right now, gumroad.com. Really, it's so easy to use. And
Gumroad?
Gum, like chewing gum.
Oh, okay.
Gumroad.com. Okay. It's amazing, and you can use video, audio. You can create PDFs, and it's. I don't make any money for promoting them. I just think I feel like people aren't being pushy enough with you, Chris. I think you have a big heart and a lot of wisdom to share, and that, and also as an artist and as a creator and someone who is in service, which I believe you are, I think finding a way to make a living doing that is making space for the people you're here to serve. It's maybe my new agey background, but I just think we all have a purpose, and you are serving the community in a very profound way. So, yeah, I just want to give a little push in that direction.
Well, I will definitely have to look into it.
Yeah.
Especially, thank you for the link.
Mm-hmm. When did you start your podcast? I have not caught up on. There's a lot I've missed that I'm still going back through. Like, when does it end? There's so many. I love it.
I started in February of 2009.
Oh, actually. So you are an early adopter of that, as far as I know.
As far as you know, yeah. There were actually. I was a part, I guess, of the second boom of Pagan Podcasts, I guess you could say. At that point, when I started, people just started popping up. There were several dozen Pagan Podcasts. Now there's not so many, but there could be a lot on Blog Talk Radio that I'm just not aware of, because everyone seems to have a Blog Talk show at some point or another.
Yeah.
But and there's a lot of stuff on there, so I'm not sure what's available on Blog Talk, and I don't get paid to promote Blog Talk. In fact, I don't really like Blog Talk Radio, and I'll just cover that up right there. So. The audio isn't usually very good, but
yeah, that's what I use. I go the path of least resistance.
You use it, and here I am. No,
it's okay. It's okay. I just got some heat for my sound quality, so I put up a donation button. I'm like, if you want it better, you have to pay for it.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, I do pay. Yeah, I do pay for the show every month. And I also pay for Baphomet's meditation, which I haven't put a new meditation out in well over a year. But I pay for that every month, too. Mm. You know. So one of the things...
That's something you sell? You sell meditations?
No. It's an account that I pay for to keep them available. So.
Very cool. All right. Well, I always end these things with asking people the same exact question. So I will ask you that question. What is your one tip? You could have many, but just whatever comes to mind for creating the kick-ass life of your dreams.
One tip, follow your heart. I mean, you've heard that before, but, follow your gut, follow your heart.
Yeah.
And I need to learn how to listen to that, so,
I feel like you are. You are. Your head, I think, is in the way a little bit, but I'm a total head case, so I relate to that. But you are all heart, in my opinion, and I really love that about you. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Much love. Peace.